Hey, what's up, Evan here. I hope your preparations for the final lab is still going smoothly. And in this video, we'll be covering action words. And why specifically action words? Because throughout my teaching years, I realized that a lot of students, they not so much have a knowledge problem, they have a communication problem. Many a time in the written work, words are used poorly. For an example, we'll use the subject of chemistry because most students should be chemistry students. Although in this channel we do cover topics of biology, chemistry and physics, but most students will be in the chemistry intersection. So an example I have is over here. I used this book as an example and I went through every single page of it and I looked through all the action words, okay, and we'll be covering what are they all about. So a very quick example is things like this: use the information in the table to explain why. So things like use, things like explain why. These are the action words that we'll be covering today in this video. Looking through the whole book, I have made a count of this. Looks pretty berserk, isn't it? So just a quick view of the action words that we'll be seeing over here. And of course, at one glance, the most used action word is going to be explain. So let me put this all into the computer first. Okay, so as you can see over here, we go from the top to the bottom. It's already been arranged from the highest count to the lowest count. And because it's a TYS, just to recap, this is the one that we are talking about. If you want to find the average amount of occurrences per paper, you just have to divide it by 10, right? You just move the decimal point one forward. Okay, so explain. So explain has 135 counts, a whopping 135 counts. Even the second one, which is which, has only 49 counts. So which is like, you can guess it, it's really a lot more than even the second one. It dwarfs everybody else. What it goes to say is that the education system or the society, the main skill set that people want you to know, the country wants you to have, is to be able to explain something properly. Like mentioned, it's not so much about students having poor knowledge skills. It's about having very poor communication skills. A lot of times students see the action word, but they execute the maneuver that's meant for another action word. Okay, so let's go from the start, that is explain. So explain is always talking about a reason or a meaning or a method or just generally the whole story behind it. So if you just break it down into common everyday language, you can ask yourself, explain why you choose this route to go to school. Then you can say, it has the least walking distance, it has the least transfers, so on and so forth. Two very good tips that I can share is you break it down. Think of a sequence. So like for example, from big to small, from small to big, from start of time to the end of the time, from inside to outside, outside to inside, and always use conjunctions. So how do you start? So things like in the beginning, as temperature rises. Firstly, conjunctions are really very important. As you go through your story, link it up using conjunctions again. Secondly, thirdly, after which, followed by, next, lastly, and this will cover your explain skill. Okay, so next one will be which. Which is also talking about, a selection of things. You're trying to choose from a given set of choices. And you can see over here, that's 49, the second highest of all action words, which goes to show the skill of choosing the right things in front of you is also very important. Okay, so suggest can merge into different maneuvers, different action words. So you can say things like suggest a reason, then you need to start explaining a little bit, or suggest an outcome, then you need to say what is the outcome. So of course, suggest is more of you need to use the information given and then therefore you infer and you give a probable outcome. And many a times is what I observe from students is students think too much. They always see that it's a test paper, then they will always have another persona that emerges. Remember that an exam paper or a test paper, whatever that the case is the whole background is somebody has already taught you something. And how do you make sure that the educator knows that what you are doing, knows what you understand? Is the educator has to ask you a question, has to prompt you something, and how you respond will show the educator whether you know your topic or not. It's the same, let's say for example, you teach somebody something. Let's say you teach your friend how to play an instrument, how to play a game. You have to prompt something to them, put them in a certain situation, like say a game, or let them play the instrument. Okay, these are questions whereby you have to force an information out of the person to say, to show, to apply whether the concept is internalized or not. So it's the same. Just think of it as a conversation between the educator and yourself. And generally this channel is talking about science. Don't have to be too bombastic in your English language. It's fine. You just have to use the most effective and efficient language. Okay, so let's carry on. So describe. And describe is one of the key skills. As you can see, it's pretty top on the scale over there. 37 counts in 10 years, which means it's like 3.7. Describe, you have to firstly think of it as a conversation. Let's say I want you to describe how am I, what is my appearance now? How do I look like in this avatar right now? So you can talk about the color of the curtain, the creases it has. Mainly it's vertical, and talk about maybe my hair, my skin color, my face, my eyes, and talk about how many stripes I have on my shoulders. So you can see descriptive language are being used. Of course, it's like describe, right? So always quote something that you see in the diagram, in the graph itself. Okay, at time 0, it's the line is flat or it's sloping upwards. At time 1 axis, quote some x-axis value, quote some y-axis value, talk about a shape, flat, tapering off, things like that. Talk about colors if you see them. But generally, I mainly recall myself telling and reminding students to quote numbers. So it's always about describing of graphs, how the graph looks like. Okay, next one is use. And of course, use, you have to, like what mentioned, right? You have to use the information given that is in the question itself. Quote something, use that information, use that concept in order to answer something. Don't just blabber away whatever knowledge that comes to mind. There are times where I gave like 0 marks because the student didn't even use where the action word is use. Follow the action word. Okay, next one is complete. So complete is pretty simple actually. It's usually what they'll give you is a certain chart, a certain table, and there are certain gaps in the middle. You just have to complete them and put the right information where they belong. And very native to chemistry is write an equation. So it depends whether is it word equation, depending, usually it has to be balanced. So I'm not going to cover that here. You can check out all the videos in the respective corner, which is like here, this corner, equations. There are ion equations, word equations, and usually they are balanced, and whether you need to have your state symbols or not. That is very important. Okay, please look and read the question properly. Also, very close to the heart of chemistry is calculate. Also very much in physics, there's a lot of calculation. So over here, calculate by and large is what? Mole, gases, volume, things like that, right? So calculate is just have to pull out your calculator and make sure your numbers are right. Give. Give is very, I would say it's like the chameleon word, right? So what is the next word? So usually it's give the something. Give the name, right, of this one. So you just have to state. It's like a state. So which is like the next few words over there. So if they're talking about give the reason, so it's something like explain. Then you need to tell a little bit more of a story. Give the similarities and differences. It's always the case whereby students are quite lazy to write. It's like writing stamina, right? Let's talk about similarities and difference, right? So similarity is A and B both have something. That is similarity. Differences is A have something, B does not have. Always have this kind of sentence structure. A have something, B does not have. Okay? Or rather, A have something where B have something else. Write a little bit more. And let's say they ask you for two differences. A have something, B has something else. You write that long sentence, that is 1 mark. Okay, so if there are 2 differences, you have to write 2 long sentences. Next one is what. What is also very chameleon kind of word. Like what? What is the name? What is the element that? What is the compound that?
then you just have to state. These are very easy ones. It's like the states, which is like the next one over there. And if let's say they are saying, what is the reason? Yeah, what is the reason? So you have to do a little bit of explaining, which is like the top one. So very easily you can drop to the bottom action word or the top action word. So state is very easy. So state, you just have to state. Like I, for example, ask you, state your name, state your class, state your CCA. It's very easy. So you just, usually this state is just a 1 mark kind of thing. Pom, state, name, and done. You don't have to even write it in complete sentences most of the time. Yeah, so always read the question and react accordingly like a real conversation. Is it reasonable for you to give a 1-word answer and full stop? Or you have to say something else, right? So state permits you to do that. Okay, state your favorite color, black, red, for example. Bam, full stop, 1 word. Okay, show is also pretty much a chameleon kind of word, show that. I recall, show that the reason is something. It's always, they have to say the word reason, right? Then it becomes explain, so it goes all the way up. Show that something will have an excess. So you need to do some calculation, then you can show that the yield or the percentage purity fits the hypothesis that is given, fits the statement that is given in the question. For example, you can say that, you know how to play game ABC. Show me you can do that. Then you have to execute certain maneuver to show that you can do it. So it's the same thing over here. When they're asking you to show, you have to execute certain maneuver to fit the criteria that is given. Draw. Okay, draw is I would say middle level skill. Middle level means is like we are reaching the middle of this table already. Middle level in terms of occurrences. Yeah, it doesn't occur too much, but it's 3 marks given. It's always so easy to score. Draw questions. In chemistry, they like you to ask you to draw dot cross diagrams for compounds, water, methane, ethane, draw displayed formula, draw lab equipments. So usually these are the easy points to score. And draw to communicate. You don't have to draw to impress. You don't need like shading, you don't need like shadow, nothing. You just have to draw the outline. Make sure the idea is out of your mind into the paper. Goes to show the educator that you know what is going on. So naming is also very similar to state. It's like, say, asking you to, name the compounds that does this, name that, show, state certain things. Name your favorite football player, name your favorite cartoon character. Bam, 1-word answer, done deal. Deduce. Deduce is something whereby you need to use the information captured and given and to be processed to be something else. Deduce is testing you on more of your inference skills. So certain things is given to you, certain story is given to you, then deduce the meaning and deduce the certain reason, deduce the outcome that comes after that. Identify, also very similar to state, to name, identify the compound, identify the element that will do certain things, bam, 1-word answer, and usually that's done. And it's usually something like choose, something like which is out of a set of choices. You have to identify which are the ones that fit your criteria. Predict is also something very similar to deduce. A certain process has happened, the story has not ended, you are asked to predict what is going to happen. So tick, that's literally the easiest. You just have to tick the right boxes or the right item, the right word, the right choices. It's very similar to things like choose, like which, like identify. Okay, so how, this word how is pretty similar to explain. So how is asking you about the reason or the method certain things is happening. There's a certain story to be told. Like for example, I ask you, how did you get to school? You have to explain the process, what mode of transport you take, and depends on this, the way this word is being used, it can be used to be another chameleon. How does certain things happen? You have to explain a certain scientific process, then after that, how do you arrive at this conclusion? Then you have to start to explain further. Include is usually a supplementary kind of word. Usually they will say, okay, describe certain process, include drawings, include working. So more points are added to this, especially when you see all of this, action words. Execute maneuvers according to the action words. Okay, so include, you have to include it. The drawing or the working, additional reasonings. Why? It's same like explain, same like how. Yeah, always asking about a certain reason. Why did you choose this method of transport? to go to school, to go to work. Okay, outline is just to briefly describe a certain process, a certain story, and usually outline questions you have to write in brief, use the most efficient word count that you can. Don't spend too much time over here, and usually the educator just wants you to briefly talk about an idea. You don't have to go into too much details about this. Like you ask, yourself, give an outline of how you start your day, your morning routine. You don't have to communicate into too much details. Discuss. So discuss it sounds very horrible to appear in a secondary level to talk about discussion, right? So what's there to discuss is just whatever you are being tested, you are just being tested on, right? So discuss is more of using your own knowledge to talk about and agree with or disagree with whether a certain phenomenon makes sense or not. Talking about discussion is like whatever is happening in the question, and whatever knowledge you have learned in your classes, you have to use that to challenge and match whether knowledge agrees or not. And generally, when you are writing answers in your paper, as long as it answers the action words and in the spirit of science, you should be fine. You should be fine. So for example, you're talking about, discuss how you plan your school camps. So you already have a certain idea. Do I have the enough resources that I have in front of me to execute certain activities? Then you have to make a discussion out of it. Decide is a little bit of a merge between like predict. It's a little bit like identify, So decide is talking about, like, similarly, a phenomenon has happened, and based on the information that you have to decide what is the outcome. So it's very similar to things like predict. Or sometimes they ask you decide whether the claim state is true. So you have to make a decision, phrase your word in the form of a decision. Construct means what? To build, to put things together. So a couple of ways to use this. And thankfully, there's only two that's given. Construct is usually things like, construct an equation, construct a circuit in physics, right? Construct an experiment. And usually they will talk about outline how you want it to be carried out. So in your written answer, you need to show that something has been constructed, something has been built there. Typically in chemistry, it's always an equation. Estimate. So estimate, of course, is for you to guess, make a little bit of a guesswork, a smart guesswork. Like if they reduce the concentration, then what kind of graph you have to draw, you have to estimate how much or how little. This is a word more commonly used in everyday language, so this is pretty simple. Compare. So compare is like finding the similarities and difference, right? Like mentioned earlier, so A and B. If you're talking about similarities, it's always A has something, B also has something. If you're talking about differences, it's A has something, B does not have, or A has something, B has something else. So be daring, especially when you write the differences. Choose one occurrence, so it's same like identify, like name, or put a tick. Evaluate is a little bit like deduce, like estimate, like predict. A certain scenario is described to you, you have to evaluate and make sure, using your own knowledge and hindsight, to be able to judge whether that claim is feasible or not. To phrase your answer in that aspect. Define, so it's just definition based, right? So there's nothing too much to cover. The only definition so far I can think of is like define what is relative atomic mass, things like that. Define, so you have to use the very scientific definition that you see in your study material. Mass of one atom compared to 1/12 of a carbon-12 atom, right? And that's the really very scientific. Why they use carbon-12 is because it's the most stable, abundant element around. Carbon-12 is used to create living matter like you and I, and like plants, and so on and so forth. So carbon-12 is the basis of comparison. And 1/12 of carbon-12 is essentially just a proton, right? Or just a neutron. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you've got to do some revision. And lastly, put and arrange. So put certain things in order. It's like, tick, it's like complete in the front. Pretty simple, nothing much going on around here. The most important skill you need to learn is to explain. You need to learn how to tell the story. You need to learn how to, most importantly, use conjunction and speak didactically, speak in sequence. So for example, crossing the road, I always use a very simple example. Approach the road, you press the button, you wait for green light, you look left and right, and finally you cross. Okay, you don't say, oh, you cross followed by this, initially I this, after that I something else, and jump your steps. It makes the reading very confusing. Always go in a certain sequence, follow chronological order, follow big to small order, small to big order, temperature rising order, outside to inside, inside to outside. Always use conjunction to link stages up together. And that is all for this video. Pretty simple, pretty short. I hope you enjoyed and found it useful. Remember, a test paper is nothing more than a piece of communication. So don't think so much. You know, don't be too stressed over what is going on. It's an exchange between you and the examiner. Communicate like a normal human being and you should be fine. And that is in the assumption that you already have all your knowledge locked in. If you have not, I have lots of videos, lots of playlists. It's all out here. Go and check them out. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.